Heute das Morgen verstehen.
Wie gelingt hybrides Arbeiten? Ist die Zeit des traditionellen Büros und des 9-to-5-Jobs eigentlich vorbei? Und wie werden wir künftig zusammenarbeiten? Darüber haben Miriam und ich vor knapp 2 Wochen bei einem Live-Event mit Nikolay Kolev gesprochen. Er ist Nord- und Zentraleuropa-Chef bei WeWork und beschäftigt sich bereits seit langem mit flexiblen Arbeitsmodellen. Das Gespräch fand auf Englisch statt und wurde aufgezeichnet und ihr könnt es jetzt hier in voller Länge noch einmal hören. Viel Spaß! Bevor es losgeht, ein kleiner Hinweis in eigener Sache. Nullen und Einsen, schwarz und weiß. Die Welt, wie sie der digitale Computer seit Mitte der 90er Jahre prägt, war binär. Einblicke in die Quantenphysik jedoch verraten, die Zukunft wird sehr viel komplexer. Am 8. und 9. Dezember diskutieren wir beim Ada Lovelace Festival mit internationalen QuantenexpertInnen, digitalen PionierInnen und euch über Quantum World. Denn die Zukunft des Computers ist auch eine Metapher für die Veränderung der Welt. Wie können wir diese Veränderung divers und fair gestalten? Und welche Auswirkungen hat die neue Technologie auf Wirtschaft und Gesellschaft? Ihr könnt dabei sein, und zwar vor Ort. Allerdings müsst ihr dann schnell sein, es gibt nicht mehr allzu viele Tickets. Natürlich gibt es aber auch die Möglichkeit, virtuell teilzunehmen. Weitere Infos findet ihr auf www.ada-lovelace-festival.com.
Welcome to Hybrid Work, Hybrid Life, a conversation between Ada's co-founder, Miriam Meckel, and Nikolay Kolev, who is Managing Director for Northern and Central Europe at WeWork. We are happy to have both of you here. Please give a round of virtual applause to both of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess most of you are familiar with WeWork. The company was founded in 2010 in New York, where it opened its first flexible office space. And WeWork essentially rents out office space to individuals, but also to companies, and offers several other hybrid work solutions. And I think it's fair to say that WeWork has had quite a few rough years. In 2019, I'm sure many of you remember the scandal around the former CEO, Adam Neumann, which led to a failed IPO and many layoffs. And then in 2020, the pandemic hit, and many office workers were forced to stay at home and not come to their shared office space. So looking back, this could have been the end for WeWork, but instead the company is still around and might even profit from the shift to hybrid work, which we'll discuss today. So that leads me to my first question, Nikki. How has WeWork managed this turnaround within the last 2 years?
First of all, it's great to see you all, and thanks for having us. It's been an interesting and challenging time, I guess, as for all of us, to say the least. As you correctly said, we've gone through a turnaround. We've gone through a difficult time as basically everyone at any given workplace. The difference is that we were hosting the workplaces, right? And a couple of weeks back, on the 21st of October, we listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And right now, basically, the focus is to welcome members back in a safe way, in a way that people can find their own balance between home, hybrid, HQ. So that's all that we're focusing on now.
But how has the pandemic affected WeWork?
Look, in a way, the pandemic, if you want, turbocharged the demand for flexibility and for demand for flexibility. Because pre-pandemic, the trend that we saw 10 years ago of commercial real estate not being only a 7, 10, 15-year lease, but bringing the moment of flexibility in and saying, well, someone might need a hyper-flexible office for an hour or a day, someone might need one for a month, and someone might need actually something which is for a few months in Korea, for a few months in the US, and then going back to Europe. That kind of flexibility didn't exist before. And the pandemic basically has shown us that this is all that's going to matter going forward. The question is, how do you shape your balance between the different options? But it is now part of everyone's idea of how work is going to work.
I know that before COVID, WeWork was very attractive for self-employed people or freelancers. What kind of industries or companies approach you now?
There has been a shift, that is true. So we started, as you correctly said, with freelancers, very small startups. And over time, we evolved to a place where a lot of large enterprise companies come in order to see and get together with startups. A lot of startups come in order to have the chance to interact with large corporates, because what for a startup is a business development is for a large enterprise talent acquisition or problem resolution. A lot of large companies go out there and try and figure out, how do we resolve some digital topics? How do we resolve some cybersecurity topics, and so on and so forth? And we have a lot of startups that are working exactly on those areas. So it is a kind of place where people come together in order to collaborate, also innovate, but also literally do business development together. So the mix has shifted.
Mm-hmm. Miriam, you also decided a few months back to move to a flexible office space with the ADA team. Why did you opt for this model?
Well, actually, kind of for the same reasons that Nikki has just pointed out, because I think we are observing probably the biggest change, or maybe even the biggest disruption of our conceptualization of workspaces, work spheres, and how work is working, like Nikki just said, at the moment, caused by the pandemic. And I remember, maybe you, Milena, remember that as well, because we had the debate about how we want to work at the A team before the pandemic hit. And we actually came up with the idea that apparently there is a mixture of something that Cal Newport calls deep work, where you really have to engage with your topics. You really need a calm space, silence. You have to focus. That is regularly, somewhat possible, but not really possible in an office, where it's about collaboration and about conversations with people, communicating with people, connecting with people, learning from other people, doing creative processes together. And so it's two totally different things that we cramped into one space. We have cramped into one space for ages, actually, since the invention of the workspace from industrial period up to now. And this is actually not working. And I'm kind of majorly happy that we have started, triggered by the pandemic, to understand that now. Some people more, some people less, of course, like always. But I think this is a huge breakthrough. And we discussed it because as a startup, you can discuss things differently at the beginning. And we came up with the idea that we want to have like 2 days in the office where all team members get together and we can really focus on the second part, means conversations, communication, collaboration, connection. And the other days, we focus on deep work where everyone can work remotely, be it at home, be it at a cafe. We actually don't care. It depends on what comes out of it, the results, and the quality of work, and not like I'm sitting here for 8 hours and that's basically my contribution to this company, because it's actually not a contribution. It's actually also very unhealthy to do that. So you should move. You should get your body in motion. You should get your thoughts and your ideas in motion. And you will not do that by sticking to a chair for 8 hours a day. So this was the conceptualization we came up with before the pandemic hit. And then somehow we suddenly all had to go into lockdown and there was no chance for office meetings. But now we established it. And I think we're still figuring it out, because there are some experiences we're just having these days of how to work best together. But it turns out as a concept that I think will stick with us for quite a while.
If I just might add to that, everything that Miriam just said is a global trend. And that is fascinating, because normally, you have European tendencies, you have Asian tendencies, you have Anglo-Saxon tendencies. You really see different, either in intensity or in direction. This thing is global. So there are two things. First of all, we've become much more intentional. That's exactly what Miriam was just describing, right? We were in and out before the pandemic, but we actually didn't know why we're going in and out, where we're going in and out. And it was very unclear. We were unhappy when we were in the office and couldn't work properly. And we were unhappy when we were too long at home and we didn't see anyone. This has become a very intentional guidance now. We know very clearly what the expectations are. The expectations when we come to an office, which is nowadays a deliberate decision, are more or less fivefold across the globe. We want to know how can we best collaborate. We want to know how and when can we expect human interaction, because that's why we're going there. We want to be productive because the data now, unfortunately, 18, almost 24 months into this pandemic show that we are significantly more productive when we are together. We want by that also to enforce the innovation. And last but not least, certainly not least, we realize that company culture, in any given culture, by the way, in any given size of a company, if you're a startup or if you're a large enterprise, company culture suffers when we can't get together at all. So those are the 5 things that we actually see across the globe happening with intention when coming to a place.
Yeah.
And Nikki, why this is a global trend? Because it's about, I'm totally with you, it's about reintroducing humanity into the workspace in a way that we try to take care of what humans really need to be productive, to be creative, and to feel good. And I mean, we spend hours a day at work, more hours often than with our partners, our friends, our families, whatever, at our own homes. So if this is the time that feels worse than being somewhere else, that's really not good. And I'm really happy about that. So that's my support for you. One contradiction about productivity, we see very different research on that. You're totally right regarding the culture of collaboration and the company culture that is often deteriorating if the teams don't see each other and don't really work together. But productivity partly is reduced, partly is leveraged by letting people work at home. So I think we have to really kind of differentiate for what kind of work, for what kinds of results we apply the different models, and also always have to keep in mind that, of course, there are some professions like nurses, like doctors, they just can't do remote work. They have to be in the place to care for example, the patients of the pandemic. And that's also something I always like to mention, because it's a difference whether you're an office worker or whether you're kind of in the field of applied health and medicine.
100%. 100%. I mean, it has to be clearly said that everything we're discussing is a white collar discussion. There was no difference for blue collar, right?
Absolutely.
If you're driving bus, or if you're in the assembly line at a OEM, or if you're working at a hospital, the choice is not really given. So everything we're discussing is a white collar discussion. And to your point about what kind of things that surface, it's a bit like when your credit card gets hacked, it is a negative experience that you have that really undermines then a lot of things going forward. Until then, this is a commodity. Security is a commodity. So all the things around well-being, around health and safety, those were things that most companies had somewhere in their playbook. But right now, they're on the forefront of everything, and companies need to deal with that. And that's why I meant it becomes so intentional. Whatever we do, whatever you decide, if you decide for fully flex, if you decide for fully home, if you decide for a hybrid model, but it is so intentional. And I think there's so many negative things that have been discussed over the last 2 years. But if there's some of those good things, then this is the intention and the clarity with which we had to deal and have to deal with all those topics that are actually at the core of what we do every day. Because as you said, that's the majority of the time, at least for most of us, that we spend in our lifetime. So it better feels good, right? That was such a soft factor in the past. You could almost not say it, but it has to be functional. It has to enable you. It has to feel good and so on. So I think that's it's good for everyone who's going to have that chance in the workplace going forward.
since you mentioned this was a soft factor before, and in the US we can see a phenomenon which is called the Great Resignation. So people are quitting their jobs essentially because they are forced to come back to the office, and they don't see why, and they want to continue working remotely, so they quit. Do you think we will see this particular trend coming to Europe and Germany as well?
I think we shouldn't aim for the Great Resignation. We should aim for the Great Revolution. Take the threats that are there right now that we discussed during these last minutes, and really turn them into a regularity, into daily practice, to really establish a work culture that allows for individualization of needs of people to really do their work in the best way, allow for human environments. I mean, there are so many examples for workspaces where you really think, well, this designer must have actually put a lot of effort in alienating my desk and my chair and everything in my work environment from me, so that I really don't feel attached to what I'm doing. And that's so wrong and so crazy. And I think the eyes are open now. All our eyes are open now regarding this development. And now resignation would be sad, because I really think we can take the chance to turn this into a trend that can really define a new world of work that is much more human, much more productive also, but also much more agreeable in a way that we can really adapt to the needs we have as humans to be to make the best of our work day or work night or whatever it is.
I think the two key elements are what you just mentioned, much more human in terms of no matter in what company you are, what industry, it can't be wrong for work to be fun and to feel good and be in a good environment, right? So that can't be by definition wrong. And at the same time, I think it would be a lost opportunity not to aim for productivity improvement. Because if you were able to bring those two together, you would have the best of both worlds. So why always think of what would be the ultimate worst result? Do we have a mass resignation? We looked at that, and the way we took this on, also the fact that some companies like Slack, for example, said they are permanently remote, right? But they came back to us and said, permanently remote doesn't mean that from time to time our teams need to come together. So things like this triggered us, for example, to come up and innovate our own product, because our product was maybe not exactly the right fit for a post-pandemic world, the way we were shaping it still. So
how did you do that?
All access was one answer to it, where we said, you can come wherever you want and whenever you want. That's also, I think, what you have. So I'm very curious to hear your feedback on that. The feedback that we got from Slack was really, really positive. Another response was to say, if this is true, what we said a couple of minutes ago, that everything happens now significantly on a more intentional basis and people come to collaborate, we need more collaborative space. We went out and combined offices and created collaboration hubs. So that's an invention we didn't have before. And I can tell you those collaboration hubs, they're very busy. Because when people come, they really want to collaborate. But in order to do that, you need to have the right architecture in place. You need to have the right product in place. It's like opening a beautifully designed car and then you drive in it and everything feels right. There's a lot of effort that goes into it so that everything comes to the right place, right? So I think the answer, rather than thinking in worst case scenarios, is how can we get most out of it? And as I said, one of our answers was to digitize our product, which was definitely needed with all access on demand, but also to think more that our place is a place where people come to collaborate more than ever before, and to just reshape the space.
Mm-hmm. You also previously mentioned a very important topic in this context, which is the company culture. When you shift to hybrid work, how do you preserve your very own specific company culture? Miriam, maybe you can give an insight into how we did this at Ada.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think it's very, very important to have regular meetings, all team meetings, to really discuss this also. So I think what we are doing is, let's quickly see. I think it's 3 or 4 times a year we do a team retreat. So we go for 1 day and an evening, or even for 2 days somewhere else, to really meet there and to really sit together and work on specific issues, be it OKRs, be it our mission, be it certain issues that are related to company culture, to our specific company culture. And also, of course, find time to just reconnect and to have a beer or a tea together or coffee and really exchange views, solve some problems, some issues that might have come up in between. That is really, really important. And the second thing that I think is important is, apart from regular meetings, like we do two times a week, which makes it a hybrid model. The second thing is, what's very important is that you need to be very clear about some rules that we also need in the virtual realm. I remember that at the beginning of the pandemic, there was partly a great chaos how to deal with Zoom meetings. Even on high executive levels, I was sitting in meetings, I can't even describe them. I really thought, what am I doing here? I'm spending 2 hours, no one is a moderator, we don't have an agenda. Why are these people here? They don't even participate. And then you start to do things like doing emails, whatever, writing texts, whatever you can do next to being in a Zoom meeting, like maybe some of the fellows are just doing, because we also don't see some people. When you turn the camera off, you can just listen, or you can't. And these are some rules I'm really keen on keeping up. I think in specific moments, you really have to be present. That also means turning the camera on and really trying to focus on the interaction that is taking place in the virtual space, because you have no other way to do that. You don't have a bodily feeling of people in a room present. So at least the visual clue is very, very important. And then also establishing rules. Who's the moderator? What is the agenda? How do we prepare this? Do we send around material in advance so that people can read and we can really focus on discussion and decision making, and not trying to then sit on Zoom and read texts together, which is totally stupid. Some things really we had to get used to, but I think establishing that really helps to set up this field. And as Nikki mentioned, Slack before, I read that Slack has a policy: if one person is not physically present, then the meeting totally goes virtual. And I think there is something about it, because it's always like a difficult bridge to gather people in an office around a laptop or around different laptops, or then discuss, and you have one laptop and the person is zoomed in. That doesn't make sense. So it's much easier then to spread, and you sit in front of the laptop and can really discuss quickly what you have to discuss, and then you can get back to your physical meeting with other people. So these are rules that are important on a very detailed level that actually make a huge difference for establishing and keeping up a company culture.
That is actually a very important issue, one of the key problems that employees face when they work remotely, when people meet in the office and they Zoom in from remote. For the people present, it is much easier to be seen and heard, and they also benefit from those in-between office chit-chat moments, which can cause something called as the proximity bias. Nikki, how do you design a workspace so that it ensures equity for everyone, also for those who join virtually?
So this actually, and it's 100% right what you're saying, but this goes actually beyond the physical space. This goes into exactly what Miriam was just referring to. This goes into, how do you create a playbook that basically helps you with guidelines, rules, like when you go on the street and you just don't cross the traffic light, although it's red. Everyone knows, red means you stand and green you walk and so on. So establishing these kind of ground rules that are crossing a certain location, be it physical, be it hybrid, because I can give you a very concrete example how we do it. So our international leadership team sits across different locations, from Singapore to London to Korea to Australia to Germany. When we sit in the room and the majority of people is maybe in London, it's exactly as Miriam just mentioned. Everyone turns their laptop on, although they might be sitting next to each other, and there's a huge screen that they see all of us. But just in order to have this feeling that everyone is actually next to each other and with each other, and that you don't have those moments where, I see all of you like on those small screens, and then you sit next to each other, and then you go like this. That's not fun for anyone else besides the two of you. So these kind of rules, to establish those, but also to make sure that they are communicated, that people know that these kind of things are not a one-off, but that's how we operate. That's our modus operandi going forward for each and every meeting, for each and every week, and so on and so forth. I think that's essential.
Miriam, according to Mark Zuckerberg, we might soon have meetings with virtual avatars somewhere in the metaverse. What do you think? What role will virtual meeting solutions play in the future?
Well, we are experimenting with that quite a bit already. We have been experimenting with that quite a bit already. I think it will play a role. Metaverse is a word that I almost I'm fed up with hearing, because it was so dominantly present all over the place at the moment because of the Facebook rebranding. But I think what's hidden in there is the opportunity to really enlarge, broaden our experience into the virtual realm with sensual participation that we haven't had before. There was Second Life. There were these first trials of opening up a virtual world, and of course we have the whole world of computer gaming where this works very well. And you can even buy haircuts for avatars and things like that, which is still a world I have to kind of get into, because this is something that also opens up a whole new business model, virtual business model for the virtual world. But for work spaces, I think it might be interesting. I'm not sure whether avatars will be the first in line to really revolutionize our workspace, because it's, again, something you can basically hide behind. So I'm not that sure whether that will really support engagement in the virtual realm in virtual meetings. But I could imagine that, for example, opening up a space where we can all basically perceive each other sitting at a table can be a huge improvement. And there are some technologies that allow for that already, where you can just be in whatever room, but perceive your colleagues to be around you, sitting around a table. And that is, of course, creating an experience of physical proximity, which is actually not there, but which you can still experience in a way that might leverage some form of connection that is not given in a regular Zoom call. So I think there are some opportunities we will have to leverage, and we for sure will leverage.
I think a big difference is that technology becomes part of the asset, of the physical asset and of the room, and is no longer carried into the room. What I mean with that is, in the good old world, we had those screens and we were moving in TVs and out and so on. And by the way, the virtual items is a 10-year-old phenomenon. That's where gaming basically started monetizing. So the trend is that a lot of things that came from the gaming and gamified world find step by step their way into business. And then it becomes at scale. And then it's interesting also for this conversation, because what we started using, for example, is hologram technology. It's exactly what you're just saying, Miriam. that is the transformation of, instead of carrying an item into a room and transmitting the two-dimensional interaction, I'm actually transmitting a three-dimensional interaction. And that is also helping for me not to hide behind an avatar, but you really see me. So we had this, we're offering this right now, I don't know, in I think 8 or 10 locations worldwide to test it. But what we did it in our own all hands, where we virtually bring everyone across the company together. And we did the hologram technology. We used it in order to have people who are one sitting in Miami, the other one sitting in New York, and the third one in Europe. They were on one fireside chat next to each other. The truth is, it works really well. And it is also bringing you physically, in a way, closer together. That's just how human beings work, right? When you see something that looks three-dimensional, it is much closer to you than when you look into two-dimensional screens. So I think this will definitely ease up interaction. It will delete what you called as distance bias, for sure. And maybe it's a positive thing. The question is, at what cost does it come? As always with technology, over time it will be significantly cheaper than it is today.
How does that work concretely, Nikki? When I work at a WeWork location, can I just book the room where the avatar, the hologram technology is, and then I can project myself to Miami?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
There's certain rooms where this is offered, like in a way, like a modern phone booth, if you want.
Can I add on your remark, Nikki, on the gaming industry, because I think there is something in there that might be interesting to analyze a little bit more in detail. Even disregarding of technology, games are something that are really they're really important for humans. We play games in the course of all our lives. Now we play computer games. And I once listened to a podcast and heard that the amount of hours people in the world put into computer games could be turned into building a few hundred Empire State Buildings a month. A few hundred Empire State Buildings a month. That's the amount of time we put worldwide into gaming. So that really stuck with me, because I thought, okay, there is something very motivational about allocating your time to games. And the question is whether we could learn something from the world of gaming for the world of work in terms of trying to leverage the motivation of people when they are more playful, when they're kind of in the flow with what they are doing, when they really want to do what they do. That would make a totally different world of workspaces. And you don't even need technology for that, but we can also leverage technology. But the question is, do we manage to take the trigger that was set by the pandemic to really turn this into a redefinition of workspace, where we might be able to leverage the power of people's engagement in a way that we always have separated from the workspace? And maybe that was a huge mistake. And that's something I'm thinking about quite a lot at the moment, because I really think we see that these tiny steps of being at home, maybe being in sweatpants, maybe listening to classical music while working, which you probably can't do at the office, kind of leveraged people in a way that they liked more what they did, that they even engaged more than they regularly do at the office. And I think getting into this mode of a flow of being more playful could be something that could, well, basically totally redefine how we work. And I think looking into the gaming industry to learn something about that could be very, very interesting.
So there are three things that come to mind with that, and I'll give you a concrete example. The first is purpose, the second one is engagement, and the third one is gamification. Because the gamification is very often completely misunderstood. Gamification is actually nothing to do with playing games. It is the way how you are engaged and interested and stimulated.
Absolutely.
By being in this with all of yourself. And that's the difference. So I entered, because you mentioned the music, I had a meeting a couple of weeks back. And by the way, one thing that struck me when I joined WeWork is there was music everywhere. You entered the building and there was music. And I thought, that's weird for a workplace. But it just stimulates in a way that you are feeling better. You're more relaxed when you walk in. So I had a meeting a couple of weeks back with a colleague, and I enter his room and there's jazz music playing. And I thought, that's really nice. It was, I've never seen this before. It was really nice. And I said, cool. I said, I've been doing this at home and it really helped me to concentrate. And I was in a much better mood to make those decisions. So I keep doing it. So I think if we could learn that engagement and playfulness and this gamified dealing with things is actually getting the best out of us instead of disturbing us and instead of making us being left and right, which is not at all the case, this would be a tremendous driver for productivity.
I'd also like to pick up a question that was sent to me from the audience, looking into the future. What is the advantage of an office to meet physically, and will there still be a need for offices at all looking a few years into the future? Will there still be offices? Will there be much smaller or not at all? What's the future of the office you see? Nikki.
I guess this one is for me. So I'm not a fan of long outlook because I think no one has a glass ball. But I can only repeat, and I firmly believe that those, first of all, office has become the choice for being, no matter if it's your HQ or some flex offering that you're using, has become much more intentional than ever before. So when you use one, you use it because you have decided to do so and not because you're asked to. And secondly, the 5 things that I mentioned around collaboration, about human interaction, about productivity, innovation, but also the driver of culture, all of those simply cannot be driven permanently by not being physically together. You just need, I don't know if all of you have experienced that, but most of my first physical meetings after the lockdown started with, "It's so nice to see you in person." This is how people, before they said hi, is how they started. And also people, by the way, that you're not like good friends or just normal business meeting where people say, "It's so nice to see someone in person." So there is a component to human beings that they need a human live interaction. Are we going to bridge this with, as we just mentioned, technology, where in some instances, I might not need to fly 12 hours for a 1-hour meeting and then fly 12 hours back? I would love to use hologram technology for that. For sure, I will going forward, instead of wasting 24 hours of my lifetime for a 1-hour productive meeting. But is a world, and just the last sentence on that, I think when we have those discussions about, is there ever going to be the need for an office and so on, I think we ought to be careful that not everyone around the globe is having the ability to have their own office and their own living room and their own kitchen and their own kids' room and bedroom and so on. For a lot of people around the globe throughout the pandemic, when they had to be in their home and do home office, the kitchen table was office table and homework table for the kids. So all of those things, and that won't change over the next few years. So clearly the division between work and life is also a physical one.
I just wanted to add to that because I really think the office has another function that is also something like a neutral ground, maybe to meet, because you may have colleagues you would really like to invite to your home, and then you sit at your dinner table and have a chat and solve some problems. But regularly, we also I don't want to idolize work environments. You will also have to deal with difficult tasks, and so it's of course very important to have a neutral ground where you can meet. I think that will be a function of the office in the future, but in a decentralized way, supported by technology, like Nikki just pointed it out. And I really want to have you as a hologram in our office, Nikki. We have to arrange for that. I want to see that. That's really a gorgeous perspective. I want to add some more idea that just came to my mind when we talked about the future of offices. I mean, what we really could ask ourselves is whether the centralized version of people taking a lot of effort, going on the bus, driving cars, being brought by parents, whatever, to come to one place to work or to learn, for example. Think of schools, whether this concept might be not the concept of the future. I mean, do we really think in terms of learning that 30 people sitting in one classroom, one behind the other, staring to the front, listening to a teacher talking at them, that this is the best way of learning? I'm really sure, and there's also research on that, that is not the best way. So if we think about what we start to understand by the future of work and the future of the office, the future of learning and the future of schools and things like that will probably also look different than we know it from today. And I think that is really worth thinking about because, again, it's about putting back the human in the center of what he, she, they need to better learn, to better work, to better connect and communicate and be creative. And that's probably not centralizing all of them in one cramped space and talking at them for whatever reason, be it the boss, be it the teacher, whoever it might be.
And how would that look like, this new world of learning?
I think decentralized, building a community of people you like to interact with to better understand things in terms of learning, to solve problems in terms of work, on a platform that can be partly virtual, that can be partly physical when you come together, like we at Ada do it, when there is not a pandemic that forces us into a lockdown for almost 2 years. Then we have this switch between virtual meetings like this one we are having right now and big conferences like the Ada Lovelace conference in Munich on 8th and 9th of December. Bringing people together to discuss topics they deal with, they want to understand, they want to help each other understanding. And that is something that can be arranged for. And it's just a very different concept than how we grew up with and have been socialized with in terms of learning or working.
I think decentralization is key, and we see this already now. I mean, this is our, so in our language, this is what we call hub and spoke model. That's exactly that it cannot be that you force people to commute. I made the extreme example of a 12 hours flight, but the less extreme, still extreme example is when you have to commute every day 2 hours, right? So why, when you can offer to your employees and to your colleagues the same professional and collaborative environment just a couple of 100 meters away from their home? And the point that I wanted to make about talent is that is another global phenomenon, that you have across the globe a shortage of talent, and talent will make their choice. And we see this already now that, people just do not want to continue, or even worse, to go back to what used to be the standard. So very often when I'm asked, how does for you look back to normal? The answer is, it's not back to normal. It's the definition of a new normal. Decentralizing, the importance of communities. Another thing it can all be summarized seriously under the word intention. Everything is significantly more intentional. When you come together, you come for the purpose of coming together and being together. And if you don't do that, then you decide that you want. So this community building has a significantly different intensity and meaning than it had before.
And I think it's also part of what employees value about work, that is shifting, that their priorities have shifted during the last 2 years.
Did priorities really shift, or did they just surface?
Oh, yeah.
It's all what we've been just discussing over the last hour. Was it really the way that people didn't want to have fun at work? Was it really the way that they didn't want to work in a nice environment? Was it really the way that they enjoyed commuting for hours every day? I doubt.
True, yeah.
It was just not accessible and acceptable for the majority. That is what has changed.
And there was no alternative. I mean, it's really interesting. I think we are going through a very slow revolution of redefining the workspace and also the function and the topicality of work. And it will take some time. I remember that The Economist the other day had a very interesting study that about 3/4 of executives love the office still. They want to get back to the office, while only 1/3 of employees want to get back to the office. So let's take a second to think about why that is the case. And then you can have a very cynical reasoning for that. You can say, well, actually, the office is the learned representation of status. So I need my huge desk and my leather chair and my 2 secretaries to really make sure that people understand that I'm the boss. So that's one reason. The second reason we quickly discussed before, which is it might be a very kind explanation. That is that executives understand I really have to take care that the people who work remotely really are heard in virtual meetings, that they are not excluded from career paths, from opportunities. That is something really important we have to take care of. And then also a third reason is we are just starting to understand this new world of work, and be it an executive, be it a regular so-called employee, we have to have our experiences, we have to learn about that, and we have to figure out how we want to do it. And I think now we discussed quite a few interesting aspects that we have to deal with, and we have to re-establish some kind of, Nikki, you just said, new normal of how we define work, and that will still take a while to convince the majority of people that this might be a really good alternative.
But I 100% agree. But I also tell you, when I zoom out, and when you're in the middle of the storm, everything feels hyper slow. We've gone through through 3-4 lockdowns, all these changes, all those debates. But when you zoom out and when you look at us and see that for the last century, we used to work in exactly the way as we did until 2 years ago. And within 2 years, which is a glimpse of time, we not only have a debate, which we are always great at, but we actually were forced through the pandemic to execute on. That is actually a massive change. So when you zoom out and in, let's say, 20, 30 years, this will certainly be a point in time where, of course, the pandemic will be remembered, but people will also say, well, that was an incredible shift in such a short time frame. It's crazy.
That's true. I would like to pick up another question that was sent by Hannah for Nikki. What is your strategy when it comes to rural areas in Europe? Yes, I know that WeWork is currently based in the big cities like Berlin, Cologne, Munich. But what about the countryside?
It's a very good question. There is a larger debate about mobility and how this hybrid work actually integrates or does not integrate rural areas, right? I mean, before, those are exactly the example that I mentioned before, people who used to commute for 1-2 hours a day, one direction, because they were living somewhere outside in the countryside and so on, and they needed to come to one hub. Now, does this hybrid model And what we also started seeing in the US, where we do have a lot of locations that are not only in New York City or in Miami, that those hub and spoke models where there's satellites, people use this more and more. But for us in Europe, we need to focus right now on our hubs, which are Berlin and Munich and Paris and London, and try and strengthen those before we think of the rural areas.
But I think it's worth exploring a little more, right? Because this hybrid trend is not only aimed at people who live in big cities, but also people in rural areas who would like to work more flexibly. How do you think they can be part of this new work experience?
Look, first of all, I believe that there will be different offerings of flexible, and not only offerings that are in the city center, but there will be different offerings how flexibility will evolve. Secondly, I am actually on the side that I do believe that this hybrid work model, where for 1 or 2 days you decide to work from a flexible space, and then maybe one day you are at your HQ, and then you're 2 days working from your home where you don't need to commute, that this is a more integrative approach towards people who live in a rural area than before, right? So I don't have the glass ball on this, but I do believe that what we see right now has been more integrative, because I did personally hear from a couple of people where I was surprised that in the pandemic, they moved out of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could try to integrate something like an adapted Airbnb model for offices, like creating a platform where people can offer their kitchen tables for a round of 4 or 5 people working together or whatever. I mean, there are many opportunities.
Miriam is already creating new business opportunities for you. Thank you both so much. Please, let's give a round of applause to Niki and Miriam.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Milena. Thank you, Niki. That was really a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise.
Das war der Ada-Podcast Heute, das Morgen verstehen. Entwickelt wird unser Podcast von der gesamten Redaktion der Ada Learning GmbH in Düsseldorf. Produziert werden die Folgen von Audioversum. Unterstützen könnt ihr uns, indem ihr uns eine 5-Sterne-Bewertung hinterlasst, uns bei Social Media empfehlt oder unser Digitalmagazin lest unter ada-magazin.com. Mehr Infos über die Ada Learning GmbH findet ihr unter join-ada.com.
Ada. Heute das Morgen verstehen.